The rain had been falling since morning, soft and steady, tapping against the cracked window panes of the old house on Hill Street. The smell of damp wood mixed with the faint tang of dust and fading paint. Lena adjusted her paint tray, the handle of her brush slipping slightly between her fingers as she pushed the front gate open. It creaked a lonely sound that matched the gray sky above Dot. She had taken this job because she needed to eat, not because she wanted to. Art hadn't paid her bills, and painting other people's walls was the only way she could still feel close to color. The world outside her work clothes was beige muted, repetitive, predictable. But inside this house, even the emptiness had a strange kind of beauty. When the front door opened, Lena froze. The woman who stood there wasn't what she expected. Evelyn looked like she had stepped out of a forgotten photograph, elegant, composed, yet carrying something hollow behind her eyes. Her voice was calm, polite, and cool when she said, "You must be the painter." Lena nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Just tell me where to start." "Call me Evelyn," the woman replied softly, stepping aside. "It's the living room first. The walls have been waiting too long." The hallway was narrow, lit by a single flickering bulb. The wallpaper had peeled near the edges, revealing thin veins of plaster underneath. Every step Lena took echoed slightly, as though the house remembered footsteps that had long stopped visiting. When she unpacked her brushes, she noticed Evelyn standing in the doorway, watching silently, holding a cup of coffee that sent a thin line of steam into the cold air. There was something in her stillness, something that made Lena uneasy, not in fear, but in recognition. It was the stillness of someone used to being alone. Hours passed with only the sound of rain and the slow rhythm of her brush. The walls began to change shape, stroke by stroke. As Lena climbed the ladder to reach the upper corners, she felt Evelyn's gaze again, gentle, observant, almost protective. Sometimes Evelyn whispered softly to herself, words Lena couldn't make out. By noon, the smell of paint filled the air. The rain had grown heavier, and the dim light through the window turned silver. Lena wiped her forehead with her sleeve. "This place must have been beautiful once," she said quietly, almost to herself. Evelyn looked up from the doorway. "It was," she said. Then, after a long pause, "It's strange how quickly beauty fades when no one sees it." Their eyes met for a moment, just long enough for Lena to notice something missing from Evelyn's hand. A ring-shaped mark, faint but visible, circled her left finger. The absence said more than words could. Lena dipped her brush into the tray again. "You paint carefully," Evelyn said after a moment, her voice low and reflective. "Like you're afraid to hurt the walls?" Lena smiled faintly without turning. "Maybe they've been hurt enough." Evelyn said nothing for a while. Then her footsteps moved softly away, echoing down the hall until only silence and the rain remained. The hours drifted. The room began to look alive again. A soft lavender hue spread across the walls, catching the light in places where the old paint had dulled. Lena worked slowly, deliberately. She imagined the house breathing again, exhaling years of dust and memory. Sometimes she caught glimpses of Evelyn through doorways or reflections in the glass pouring tea, standing near a window, lost in thought. Once, Lena heard a faint melody coming from upstairs, a piano playing, slow and mournful. She followed the sound for a second in her mind, then forced herself back to the wall in front of her. By late afternoon, the rain softened into a drizzle. Evelyn appeared again, leaning against the doorframe. "You've done well," she said quietly. "It feels different already." Lena shrugged. "Paint can do that. It tricks the eye into thinking something's new." Evelyn's lips curved slightly. "Maybe I like being tricked." Lena glanced up. "You don't strike me as the kind of person who likes illusions." For a second, Evelyn looked as though she might answer, but instead she turned toward the window, her profile framed by pale light. Everyone does, she said finally. Some of us just call them memories. The conversation faded. The last of the light slipped away. When Lena began packing up her tools, Evelyn lingered, as if she had more to say but couldn't find the words. Will you be back tomorrow? She asked softly. Yes, the hallway needs 2 coats. Evelyn nodded. Good. Then, after a moment, be careful going home. The road floods easily after rain. Lena smiled faintly. I'll manage. As she stepped out into the mist, she looked back once. Evelyn stood behind the glass door, a shadow among the warm glow of the room. The newly painted walls seemed to hold her in place, like a portrait that couldn't move even if it wanted to. The rain kissed Lena's face as she walked down the steps. The brush in her hand was streaked with lavender, the same color she'd chosen for the walls, a color that felt like quiet longing. Soft and unsure dot behind her, the house on Hill Street hummed with the faint sound of rain and silence. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls weren't the only ones she had begun to paint that day. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and cool, the smell of wet soil seeping in through the open windows. Lena arrived early, her breath forming faint clouds in the chill. Evelyn's house looked softer now, less like a ghost and more like something beginning to wake. Evelyn met her at the door in a loose robe, her hair pulled up, but a few strands falling carelessly against her cheek. She offered a quiet good morning and pointed Lena upstairs. The bedroom today, she said. It's been years since anyone touched those walls. The room was different from the rest of the house, brighter, though the light felt lonely. Pale curtains fluttered against a cracked window frame, and the faint scent of lavender lingered in the air. A dressing table stood near the wall, covered in old bottles of perfume, some empty, some gathering dust. A single photograph face down on the table. Lena stirred the paint slowly, her brush tapping against the rim of the tray. Same color? She asked. Evelyn leaned against the doorframe. Something lighter. I want the room to feel less sad. Lena nodded. Lighter but not empty. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Something silent passed between them, something neither could name. Then Evelyn smiled faintly and disappeared down the hallway, her footsteps echoing until they faded into the house's hollow air. Lena began to paint. Each stroke was slow, deliberate, her hand steady as she covered years of gray with gentle cream. The room began to breathe differently. She could feel the change, not just on the walls, but in herself. Hours passed quietly. At times, Lena could hear Evelyn moving somewhere below, faint music drifting from a radio, an old love song, the kind that sounded like remembering. When Evelyn returned, the afternoon light had begun to turn golden. She stood behind Lena, closer than before, her shadow falling across the wet paint. It looks beautiful, she murmured. You make it look effortless? Lena smiled without turning. It's easier when the walls don't argue. Evelyn chuckled softly, the sound low and warm. Then, as Lena leaned forward to reach a corner near the headboard, Evelyn stepped closer still. The distance between them vanished. Lena could feel her presence, her perfume, her breath, her quiet tension. You missed a spot, Evelyn said gently. Lena turned slightly, frowning. Where? Evelyn's lips curved. There. She pointed to a faint patch of wall, then paused. Her finger hovered mid-her. Her voice softened, almost breaking into a whisper. You missed a spot. On me. The words hung in the air like electricity. Evelyn's tone was playful, but her eyes betrayed her, a sadness, a longing hidden beneath that half-smile. Lena froze, the brush slipping slightly from her hand, leaving a streak of paint near her wrist. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Evelyn laughed, light but uneasy. I'm joking, of course, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Lena forced a smile. Of course. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was the kind that breathes between two people who suddenly see too much. Evelyn crossed her arms, looking around the half-painted room. "I don't let many people in here," she said softly. "It feels strange watching someone touch these walls." Lena dipped her brush again. "Sometimes the walls need to be touched. Otherwise, they forget they're still standing." That made Evelyn glance at her again. Her expression softened like a wound briefly exposed. Later that evening, as Lena cleaned her brushes in the kitchen sink, the air between them felt different, fragile, uncertain, but alive. Evelyn poured tea for them both, though neither drank much. The quiet hum of the old refrigerator filled the space between their sentences. "My husband left," Evelyn said suddenly, her voice quiet but steady. 6 months ago. One morning, he said he needed air. I didn't realize he meant forever." Lena looked up slowly, not out of pity but understanding. "This house feels too big for one person," she said. Evelyn's lips twitched. "It feels empty. Even the silence echoes." Lena nodded, staring into her cup. "That's why I paint," she said after a while. "Because colors don't lie. People do." The room grew still. Evelyn studied her face. Something in Lena's voice had cut through her usual composure. "You've been hurt too," she said softly, not as a question but a recognition. Lena only smiled faintly. "We all have. Some of us just learn to hide it behind color." The clock ticked. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows again, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. Evelyn's shoulders relaxed slightly. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman guarding her pain. She looked like someone who wanted to set it down. As Lena gathered her things, Evelyn followed her to the door. "You're good at this," she said. "Not just the painting, the presence of it, the quiet." Lena laughed softly. "Quiet is cheaper than therapy." That made Evelyn smile, genuinely this time. Her voice dropped to something tender, hesitant. "Don't forget to come tomorrow." "The living room still needs color." Lena met her eyes. "I'll be here." When she stepped outside, twilight had settled over the street. The air shimmered faintly with leftover rain, and the pavement glistened beneath her boots. She paused at the edge of the path, looking back. Evelyn was still standing in the doorway, framed by the golden light inside. For reasons she couldn't explain, Lena felt her chest tighten. Something had shifted between them, not a confession, not even a touch, but something deeper. A silent understanding that neither would admit out loud. As she walked away, she thought of Evelyn's words, "You missed a spot on me." Lena smiled faintly to herself. She didn't know it yet, but those words would stay with her long after the paint dried. Days folded into one another, soft and unspoken, until Lena could no longer remember how many mornings she had walked up the stone steps to the house on Hill Street. Each day began the same way. Evelyn at the door, quiet smile, robe tied loosely, coffee cup in hand. But something had changed. The air between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like gravity. The work moved slowly now. Not because the house demanded time, but because they both did. The once faded rooms began to wear their new colors like fresh skin soft creams, pale greens, and the faintest trace of lavender. Evelyn followed Lena from room to room, not as an employer, but as if afraid to let her slip too far away. They talked as Lena painted. Not about anything planned or profound, just small things that filled the silences, art, music, places they had dreamed of visiting but never did. Evelyn confessed she once wanted to open a gallery, but life, marriage, expectations, disappointments had settled around her like dust. "Do you miss him?" Lena asked quietly one afternoon, her brush tracing the edge of the wall. Evelyn hesitated, her gaze far away. "Sometimes," she said finally, "but not in the way people think. I miss the idea of being seen." I don't think he ever really looked at me. Lena paused, watching her. Then he was blind in all the wrong ways. Evelyn smiled, small and unsure. And what about you, Lena? Who didn't see you? Lena shrugged. Someone who thought I'd grow out of who I am. But I didn't. The sound of paint dripping into the tray filled the space after that. Neither spoke for a long time, but something had settled in understanding, quiet and complete. Later, Evelyn joined her. She took a brush for the first time, dipping it clumsily into the paint. "I'll help," she said, though her grip was hesitant. Lena laughed softly. "You're holding it like it's fragile?" "Maybe I am," Evelyn said. "I've never painted anything before." As she tried, a small streak of paint landed on her hand, then another on her wrist. Lena reached out without thinking and wiped it away with her thumb. The contact was brief, but it lingered in the air like a secret neither wanted to name. Evelyn's lips parted slightly, her eyes meeting Lena's for just a second too long. Lena's voice in the back of her mind murmured, "Sometimes love doesn't knock. It sits quietly beside you while you pretend to work." That afternoon, Evelyn led her into a room Lena hadn't seen before. It was small, filled with dust and sunlight, the art room her husband had once meant to use. Canvases leaned untouched against the walls, and old jars of paint had dried and cracked. Evelyn's fingers traced one of the canvases, her face unreadable. "He wanted to paint," she said softly. "Said he'd start when he had time. But he never did. I think he was afraid of what he'd see if he tried." Lena looked at the half-open window where the light fell in thin lines across Evelyn's hair. "Maybe he never loved the way you needed him to," she said before she could stop herself. Evelyn turned toward her slowly. "Maybe no one has," she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The light dimmed and rain began to fall, steady and hard. They hurried to close the windows, but the wind pushed through, carrying droplets that spattered across the floor. Evelyn laughed as they struggled with the latch, her hair falling loose, her robe sleeve wet. The power flickered once, then went out. The house fell into darkness. Except for the faint glow of lightning through the curtains, Evelyn moved carefully through the dark, her voice low. "Wait here." Moments later, she returned with a handful of candles. She lit them one by one, the small flames dancing in the shadows, filling the space with a golden warmth. They sat together on the floor near the doorway, listening to the storm. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling into a tin bowl, the sound rhythmic and calm. The flicker of candlelight caught Evelyn's eyes, making them look softer, almost young again. "I used to love storms," she said. "They made me feel less lonely, like the world was crying with me." Lena smiled faintly. "I think storms are the earth's way of washing itself clean." For a long while, neither spoke. The air between them thickened, not just with silence, but with something tender and dangerous. Evelyn's fingers rested near Lena's on the floor, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Evelyn's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Do you believe love can begin after loss?" Lena's heart beat harder in her chest. She met Evelyn's gaze, steady and calm. "I think love begins where loss ends," she said quietly. The candles swayed with a sudden gust through the cracked window. Their faces glowed, pale and soft in the shifting light. Evelyn's hand inched slightly closer, the distance between them thinning until their fingers almost met. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Evelyn exhaled shakily, her hand retreating. She looked away, eyes glistening faintly. "It's late," she said, her voice breaking the spell. "You should stay until the rain stops." Lena nodded, her throat tight. Okay. They stayed there, side by side, surrounded by candlelight and the sound of rain. Words became unnecessary. The unspoken lingered in every breath, every glance, every heartbeat that dared to echo too loud when the storm finally eased. Lena gathered her things in silence. Evelyn followed her to the door, her face unreadable, her voice soft. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Lena asked. "For bringing color into this house again," Evelyn replied. "For making it remember what light feels like." Lena wanted to say something, anything, but the words refused to come. She only nodded, stepping out into the damp air. The scent of rain and lavender clinging to her clothes. Behind her, the candles still flickered in the upstairs window, their light trembling against the night like the fragile promise of something real. The rain began as a whisper on the windows, soft and hesitant, like the world was afraid to breathe too loudly. Lena had just finished painting the hallway when the storm deepened, each drop hitting harder, faster, until thunder cracked through the night like something breaking inside the sky. The lights flickered twice, then died completely. The house sank into darkness. Only the faint scent of lavender remained familiar now and strangely comforting. She reached for her phone, its dim glow casting small circles of light over her brushes and open cans of paint. Then she heard footsteps. Evelyn appeared at the end of the hallway, her outline caught by the faint shimmer of lightning through the window. She held 2 mugs of tea, steam curling upward, and her voice came quiet but steady. "Stay tonight," she said. "It's not safe to drive in this weather." Lena hesitated, her hand still gripping the brush. "Are you sure?" "I can wait until the rain slows." Evelyn shook her head gently. "No, please, it's fine." The word "please" lingered between them longer than it should have. Lena nodded, placing the brush down. The sound of the rain filled the silence that followed. They sat together near the living room window, the glow of a single candle dancing between them. Shadows painted soft patterns on the wall, the same walls Lena had spent the week coloring in quiet patience. The candlelight caught pieces of Evelyn's face, the curve of her cheek, the sadness that had become part of her beauty. After a while, Evelyn spoke, her voice barely above the hum of rain. "You know what I miss the most?" Lena looked up. "What?" "Not him," Evelyn whispered. "Not my husband. Not his words or his habits. I just miss being touched like I matter." The words hung heavy in the air. Lena's heart stumbled. She wanted to speak, to say something that would ease the ache she heard in Evelyn's voice, but the right words refused to come. Instead, she just looked down at her own hands that only ever touched walls, brushes, and colors. Hands that didn't know what to do with someone else's loneliness. Evelyn set her cup down slowly, her eyes never leaving Lena. Lightning flashed through the window, painting their faces in brief white light. When it faded, Evelyn leaned forward just a little, close enough for Lena to smell the faint trace of vanilla and rain on her skin. Her voice broke into a trembling whisper. "You missed a spot again." Lena frowned in confusion until Evelyn's fingers brushed her cheek, smudging a streak of blue paint that had somehow found its way there. The touch was small, delicate, but it felt like it reached all the way through her chest. Neither moved. The world outside roared with thunder, but inside, everything went still. Evelyn's hand lingered against her skin. Their eyes met, no longer painter and client, no longer strangers crossing polite boundaries, but 2 women standing at the edge of something unnamed. Lena felt the air thicken between them, warm and trembling. She didn't know who leaned closer first. It didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling, the quiet understanding that they were both trying to fill the same kind of emptiness. Their foreheads touched, a breath shared, the faintest brush of lips that wasn't quite a kiss. It was gentler than that, sadder too, like both of them were afraid to want more, yet unable to step away. Evelyn's voice cracked softly against the candlelight. "I don't know what I'm doing." Lena closed her eyes, whispering, "Neither do I." Then Evelyn pulled back. The connection shattered like glass. She turned toward the window, her shoulders trembling, hiding her face with one hand. "I shouldn't have," she whispered. She stopped, the rest of the words drowned by the storm. Lena stood slowly, her heart twisting. She wanted to comfort her, to say it was all right, that sometimes people needed to feel alive again. But she knew anything she said would only make it harder. They didn't speak again that night. The candle burned lower and lower until it flickered out, leaving only the silver wash of lightning across the walls. Evelyn fell asleep on the couch, her head resting on her arm, her face peaceful and tear-streaked. Lena watched her for a long time, memorizing the quiet tragedy of her expression before she finally turned away. Dawn came pale and gray, the storm a soft memory outside. Lena stood at the doorway, her jacket in hand, the smell of wet earth drifting through the open window. Evelyn was awake, standing a few feet behind her. "Thank you for staying," Evelyn said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were swollen. "Be careful on the road." Lena nodded, forcing a small smile. "I will." Evelyn looked as if she wanted to say more, but didn't. The silence between them stretched thin, fragile. Then Lena stepped outside. The door closed softly behind her. The world was quiet again. As she walked down the path, the fresh paint on the house gleamed faintly under the weak sunlight, smooth and perfect. But inside her, everything felt raw and unfinished. Sometimes she thought color can cover cracks, but not heal them. The rainwater clung to her shoes as she reached her car. She glanced back once, just once, and saw Evelyn standing by the window, her face hidden behind the curtain, the shape of her hand pressed faintly against the glass. Lena whispered to herself, "Some nights don't end when the sun rises." She started the engine and drove away. The road was wet and glistening, a mirror for the sky that had already stopped crying. But inside her chest, the storm kept echoing soft, relentless, unforgettable. And for the first time, she understood what Evelyn meant. She didn't miss anyone. She just missed being touched like she mattered. The days that followed felt slower than rain drying on glass. The storm had passed, but something heavier lingered in its wake, a silence that filled every corner of the house, thick and unspoken. Lena returned to finish the last of her work. No music played. No laughter echoed down the halls anymore. Just the soft scrape of her brush against freshly primed walls, the rhythm steady, mechanical, hollow. Evelyn didn't greet her at the door this time. The maid had let her in with a nod and disappeared quietly. For hours, Lena painted alone, her thoughts looping like an unfinished melody. Every stroke carried a memory, Evelyn's half smile, the warmth of candlelight, the way her hand had trembled after touching her cheek. Each color she laid onto the walls seemed to drain color from her own heart dot by the third day. Lena had finished nearly every room. The house looked beautiful alive even. Sunlight spilled through the clean windows, dancing across pale ivory walls that gleamed softly. The scent of new paint mixed with lavender still clinging faintly from the stormy night. It should have felt like accomplishment. Instead, it felt like a farewell. Evelyn appeared in the doorway as Lena packed her brushes. She looked different now, her hair tied back, her voice distant. The softness that had once hovered in her eyes was gone, replaced by something harder, something that hid pain beneath control. "You work fast," Evelyn said quietly. Lena smiled faintly, not looking up. "Deadlines make people efficient." Silence stretched between them, sharp and awkward. Evelyn took a small breath, stepping closer. Her tone wavered. "I'm sorry about that night. I don't know what came over me." Lena finally looked up. "You don't have to explain. Some moments just happen." Evelyn's gaze dropped to the floor. "Maybe, but I shouldn't have made you part of my mess." Lena hesitated, her chest tightening. "You didn't make me part of it, Evelyn." I walked in willingly. The truth of it hurt more than she expected. Evelyn looked toward the window, where light poured in, golden and indifferent. "You gave color to this house," she whispered, "and took it away from me." For a long moment, Lena said nothing. Then, with quiet steadiness, she replied, "Maybe you were never ready to see what love looks like." Evelyn's breath caught, her lips parting as if to answer, but no words came. The silence between them filled again, this time final, heavy, unrepairable. Lena turned back to her work table, her hands trembling as she cleaned the last of her brushes. The water in the tin cup turned cloudy, gray, as she rinsed away the color that had once felt like hope. She packed everything neatly into her worn bag, the brushes, the old cloth, the palette. Her fingers lingered on the handle, reluctant. "Goodbye, Evelyn," she said softly, not trusting herself to turn around. Evelyn didn't respond right away. Only when Lena reached the doorway did she whisper, "Goodbye, Lena." The word sounded too fragile for the space it occupied. Outside, the afternoon light stretched long across the yard. The rain had coaxed life back into the garden. The grass shimmered green, flowers tilted toward the sun. Lena paused halfway down the path and looked back at the house one last time. Evelyn stood in the window again, her silhouette framed by the new bright walls. For a moment, it looked as if she belonged there, perfectly beautiful, composed, untouchable, but Lena knew better. She knew that behind that stillness was a woman who had learned to live with emptiness, who had mistaken distance for safety. And somewhere inside, she also knew that she loved her for it. Her voice broke softly in the narration of her thoughts. Some loves aren't meant to last. They exist to remind us what we still feel. The wind caught her hair as she reached her car. The smell of paint and rain clung to her clothes. She tossed her brush bag onto the passenger seat and sat for a moment, staring at her hands still faintly stained with the same color that covered Evelyn's walls. No amount of washing would take it away completely. As she started the car, the radio played a faint piano piece, slow and nostalgic. She didn't know the name of the song, but it felt right. The house grew smaller in her rearview mirror, its windows glowing softly in the golden light of dusk. Lena whispered to herself, "I gave her a home full of color. She gave me a heart full of silence." The road ahead stretched endlessly, shimmering in heat and light. She drove without looking back again. The brush she'd used for weeks lay on the seat beside her, dry and fragile now, a memory frozen in bristles. She thought of throwing it away, but couldn't. Some things, she realized, weren't meant to be cleaned or forgotten. As the car disappeared down the winding road, the camera of memory lingered on the house, the sun catching its walls, the open door swaying slightly in the breeze before closing with a soft click. Inside, a single room still smelled faintly of paint and lavender. The silence was almost beautiful. The music faded slowly, the piano dissolving into quiet. And somewhere, in that stillness, it felt as though both women painter and muse, lover and stranger, had left something of themselves behind. Something invisible, something real. The seasons had changed by the time Lena finally learned to breathe again. The city no longer felt as gray as it used to. She had left Hill Street months ago, trading quiet houses and peeling walls for open murals that stretched across alleyways and brick buildings. Her art had grown bolder, no longer just repairs or repaints, but full stories told in color. Every morning, she carried her brushes like old friends, their tips worn but faithful. She painted women, mostly women standing tall with cracked hearts, women staring at oceans, women holding flowers that refused to die. When people passed, they saw beauty. When Lena stepped back, she saw memory. She never went back to the house on Hill Street, but sometimes when she mixed her paints, she still found herself reaching for lavender, the shade that had once filled a lonely room with something that felt almost like love. One bright afternoon, she returned home from a commission downtown and found an envelope tucked beneath her door. No sender, just her name written in neat, deliberate handwriting she hadn't seen in months. Her heart stalled. For a moment, she just stared at it, afraid of what memories it might reopen. Then she sat down by the window, tore it open carefully, and pulled out a small photograph. It was the house, Evelyn's house, but it looked different now. The garden was alive again, bright and full of color. The windows were open, sunlight pouring through them. The walls she had painted glowed warm and soft, not with perfection, but with life. Behind the photo, a small note in familiar handwriting read, "Every time I see these colors, I remember the day I felt alive again." Lena's throat tightened. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes stinging, a laugh breaking through the ache. The kind of laugh that comes from remembering something both beautiful and lost. She traced the words with her fingertips, as though they were something fragile. She imagined Evelyn standing in that house, now no longer haunted, maybe even smiling. It didn't erase the pain, but it softened it. For a long while, Lena just sat there, the photo resting on her lap, sunlight spilling over her shoulders. She whispered into the quiet, "You were always the color, Evelyn. I just helped you see it." The next morning, she took her paints to an empty wall downtown, a blank stretch of concrete bathed in golden light. As she unpacked her tools, she set one jar of color aside, lavender. She dipped her brush slowly, almost reverently, and began to paint. Each stroke was steady, deliberate. She didn't rush. Around her, the city hummed with traffic and chatter, but she moved like she was somewhere else, back in that rain-soaked house, back in that soft glow of candlelight, back with the woman who had once said she missed being touched like she mattered. Now, Lena understood. Maybe love wasn't supposed to last. Maybe it was meant to awaken something, to remind you that your heart still beats. As she painted, her voiceover drifted softly in her thoughts, like a letter to herself. Maybe love isn't about staying. Maybe it's about leaving color in someone's world before you go. She paused, watching the sunlight slide across the wet paint. The lavender shimmered faintly, alive against the gray wall. In it, she saw Evelyn's eyes, the rain on the window, the trembling of a hand that once brushed her cheek. When she stepped back to look at the mural, she saw not sadness, but continuation. A woman standing in a field of lavender, her face turned toward the horizon, her hair tangled in the wind, strong, free, whole. Lena smiled faintly, setting her brush down. The breeze carried the scent of rain somewhere far away, as if the world remembered too. Her voice soft in narration, final and full of quiet truth. She said, "I missed a spot." Maybe she was right. I missed the part of me that only she could see. She wiped her hands on her apron, the faint stains of lavender clinging to her skin like old love that refused to fade. The camera of memory pulled back slowly, Lina a small figure against a vast wall of color, sunlight washing her in gold. Somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed faintly, mingling with the soft rhythm of rain that wasn't really there. The screen faded to white, the sound of a single piano note holding in the air gentle, lingering, unresolved. And in that final moment, the color stayed.